You have exactly 6 weeks. Not 6 weeks to find a job. Not 6 weeks to plan a wedding. 6 weeks to find the person you might spend the rest of your life with, out of a group of maybe 100 people you only see once a year before everyone scatters back across a frozen continent and disappears again for 12 months. That was the reality for your ancestors, and somehow, in that impossible window, they still managed to fall in love. Not just mate, not just pair off for survival. Fall in love, the way you understand it, the nervous stomach, the staring across a fire hoping someone stares back, the specific ache of missing one person out of everyone in the world. It sounds almost impossible. A cold, brutal, starving world, and somewhere inside it, romance. But here's the strange truth. The pressure of that short window didn't kill love. It might be the exact reason love, as we feel it today, exists at all. Let's start with the world this was actually happening in, because it explains everything about why love had to move so fast. For most of the year, ancient humans lived in tiny, scattered bands, 20 people, maybe 30, spread out across enormous frozen land, isolated from almost everyone else of their kind. You might go an entire year without meeting a single new person outside your immediate group. Your options for love were basically your cousins, and that's a problem evolution needed to solve. Then summer came. The ice cracked, the rivers opened, and those tiny scattered bands did something extraordinary. They walked. They followed rivers and valleys toward the same meeting places their parents and grandparents had used for generations, and for a few short weeks, all those lonely little bands became one enormous gathering, 100 people, sometimes more, together in one place, around one enormous fire. This was it. This was the one shot. If you were a young hunter or a young woman coming of age, this gathering wasn't just a food event. It was, in the most literal sense, the only dating pool you were ever going to see, and you had a matter of weeks before it dissolved back into isolation for another full year. Now put yourself there for a second. Imagine knowing that the person across the fire, the one who keeps looking over, the one who laughed at something you said, might be the only real chance you get this year. Not this month, this year. That kind of pressure changes everything about how quickly connection has to happen. Here's something modern psychology actually backs up. Scarcity intensifies attraction. When people know an opportunity is limited, time-boxed, about to disappear, their emotional responses to it get stronger, not weaker. Researchers who study attraction have found that a ticking clock, a flight leaving, a study abroad ending, a deadline approaching, tends to accelerate how fast people bond and how intensely they feel it. Some psychologists call this time pressure intimacy. Under a deadline, people skip the slow, careful getting-to-know-you phase and jump straight to something deeper, faster. Your ancestors were living inside that exact psychological pressure cooker every single summer, and they didn't even need to understand why it worked. It just did. So the 6-week clock wasn't just cruel. It might have been the very thing that made ancient love burn so bright, so fast. But before two people could fall for each other, they first had to actually meet. And this is where the summer gathering becomes genuinely fascinating. These weren't random reunions. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies have found something remarkable about how these groups avoided one very real danger: inbreeding. Small, isolated bands couldn't keep finding partners only within their own group generation after generation. It simply doesn't work biologically. So human social structures evolved a built-in solution: exogamy, marrying outside your own band. And the summer gathering was exactly where that happened. This means every single summer wasn't just a reunion of old friends. It was, in a very real sense, a village-sized blind date, deliberately structured across generations to bring unrelated young people together at exactly the moment they were old enough to pair off. Grandparents who had once met their own partner at one of these very gatherings were now watching their grandchildren do the same thing, by the same fire, on the same stretch of river, maybe using the same walking route their family had followed for centuries. Love, quite literally, ran on a schedule passed down through generations. Here's where it gets even more interesting. This gathering wasn't only about finding someone new, it was also about finding someone again. Because remember, these bands scattered every single year. If you met someone last summer, someone who made your stomach flip, someone you thought about more than you expected to during the long, dark, isolated winter that followed, you had absolutely no way to contact them, no messages, no way to know if they were even still alive. You simply had to wait and hope and show up again next summer and hope they showed up too. Think about what that kind of waiting actually does to a feeling. Modern research on long-distance relationships and periods of separation has found something almost poetic. Physical distance, when there's still hope of reunion, often intensifies emotional attachment rather than weakening it. Psychologists call part of this idealization the tendency to remember someone more fondly, more intensely, the longer you're apart from them, especially without contact to correct or complicate the memory. So imagine an entire winter, 9 months of darkness and hunger and grinding survival, with one small warm thought sitting somewhere in the back of your mind. A face, a laugh, a hope that they'll be there again when the ice breaks. That thought alone might have been enough to help some people survive the winter at all, a reason to make it to spring beyond simple biology. And when summer finally returned, and the person you'd been carrying in your memory for 9 months actually walked back into camp, alive, older, real again, that reunion must have been almost unbearably intense. Nothing modern really compares to it. No amount of texting closes a 9-month, no-contact silence with that same force. Now here's the part that will genuinely surprise you. Falling in love wasn't just an emotional event for ancient humans. It may have been one of evolution's most important survival tools, hiding in plain sight. Here's the problem love actually solves. Raising a human child is, biologically speaking, a disaster. Human babies are born helpless. They stay helpless for years, and a single parent trying to do it alone in a harsh Ice Age environment is at an enormous disadvantage. Pair bonding, the tendency for humans to form long, emotionally intense attachments to one specific partner, appears to be a direct evolutionary answer to that problem. Two committed parents, sharing the impossible workload of keeping a child alive, dramatically increase that child's odds of survival. But here's the twist that most people never think about. For pair bonding to actually work, it needed to feel like something. It needed a reward. It needed a reason strong enough to keep two people choosing each other season after season through exhaustion and hunger and everything an Ice Age winter could throw at them. That reward is what we now call love, the specific, irrational, overwhelming pull toward one person out of everyone else. It isn't a poetic accident. Some researchers who study the evolution of human bonding argue that romantic love itself, the actual feeling, the flutter, the obsession, the ache, evolved specifically as the emotional glue strong enough to hold two exhausted, struggling humans together long enough to raise a child who couldn't survive otherwise. That means the exact feeling you felt, the nervous stomach, the staring, the missing someone so much it's physically uncomfortable, is not a modern invention softened by poetry and movies. It's an ancient survival mechanism so old it predates language itself. If that thought gives you chills, this is exactly the kind of human story this channel exists to tell. So go ahead and hit subscribe, because there's a lot more of it still buried in the ice. Now, let's kill a myth while we're here, because it matters. There's a common, lazy assumption that ancient relationships were purely practical, cold, transactional pairings based only on who could hunt and who could gather. No feeling involved, just biology doing its job. The archaeological record disagrees. Burials from this era sometimes show couples placed together deliberately, arranged close, sometimes holding hands, sometimes buried with matching or paired objects. At certain Ice Age sites, archaeologists have found double burials where two individuals appear to have been placed together with obvious care, not convenience. You don't carefully arrange two bodies together, spend precious time and effort on that arrangement, unless the connection between them meant something beyond simple utility. These weren't just breeding partners. They were people who mattered to each other enough that someone, after they were gone, wanted the world to know it. So what did all of this actually look like on a single summer evening? Picture it, the long light of an ice-age summer evening, the kind that barely fades before morning comes back. 100 people around one enormous fire, someone telling a story from the last winter, children who've never met their cousins finally meeting them. Somewhere at the edge of the firelight, a young man notices a young woman he's never seen before. Someone from a different band. Someone who walked days to be here. She notices him noticing. Neither of them says much. There isn't much time to be shy. In 6 weeks, this fire will go cold, and everyone will scatter back into the silence of the steppe for another year. So you don't waste the summer being careful. You sit a little closer tonight than you did last night. You learn her name. You memorize the sound of her laugh, because you might be carrying it alone through 9 months of darkness before you hear it again. That is what ancient love actually looked like. Urgent, real, aching, not so different from anything you felt yourself. So how did ancient humans fall in love during the only weeks they weren't fighting to survive? They fell fast because they had to. They fell hard because scarcity and distance made every feeling more intense, not less. They found each other through a social system built across generations specifically to bring unrelated people together at exactly the right moment. They carried each other's memory through brutal winters, using nothing but hope to survive the weight. And underneath all of it, evolution had quietly built romantic love itself as the glue strong enough to hold two people together long enough to keep a fragile human child alive. None of that is really ancient history. It's still exactly what love feels like today. The nervous wait for someone to text back. The ache of distance. The relief of reunion. You didn't invent any of it. You inherited it from people who felt it first, around a fire, on a frozen steppe, with only 6 weeks to make it count. And if you want to know what happened when that same summer fire finally died down, when the long winter silence returned, and two people who loved each other had to survive 9 months apart, with no way to know if the other was even still alive, that story is next, and it's just as heartbreaking as you'd expect. Go watch it, and I'll see you there.